In the village of Aoro, there lived a woman named Adana. She was married to the wealthiest chief in the village, a man 20 years older than her. Age didn't matter to Adana. What mattered was the wealth and comfort that came with being married to the chief. The chief already had 3 wives before marrying Adana, making her the youngest and most favored among them. This favoritism quickly became a source of tension, especially with the chief's 3rd wife, Wafaa, who had been the favorite until Adana arrived. Wafaa harbored a deep hatred for Adana, and the feeling was mutual. The 2 women constantly clashed, turning their bickering and fights into a regular spectacle within the chief's household. The other wives, having grown weary of the constant drama, chose to distance themselves from the conflict. 5 years into Adana's marriage, the chief passed away, plunging the household into mourning. The entire village grieved the loss of their leader, and his wives were left to fend for themselves. The older wives were taken to Lagos by their children, who had become successful in various fields. This left Adana and Wafaa alone in Aoro village. After the chief's death, Wafaa decided to start a food business. She was well known and loved in the village, which quickly made her business thrive. Wafaa was generous and kind-hearted, often giving food to beggars and those in need. Her meals became a favorite among the villagers, but Adana couldn't bear to see Wafaa's success. Jealousy consumed her, and she decided to open her own food business directly across from Wafaa's shop. The villagers were surprised by this move, knowing the deep animosity between the 2 women. But Wafaa wasn't surprised. She knew Adana's intentions but chose to ignore her. Weeks passed and Adana's business struggled. She managed only 5 to 10 customers a day, often throwing away unsold food, which led to significant losses. Meanwhile, Wafaa's shop was always bustling with customers. The villagers gossiped and laughed at Adana, mocking her for trying to compete with Wafaa. One morning, Wafaa arrived at her shop to find a shocking sight. Adana was serving a large crowd of customers. It seemed that all of Wafaa's usual patrons had suddenly flocked to Adana's shop. Puzzled, Wafaa tried to brush it off as a fluke, but even after preparing her usual delicious meals, no one came to her shop. Frustrated and angry, Wafaa decided to confront Adana to uncover what was happening. Wafaa stormed into Adana's shop, her eyes burning with anger. "What have you done, Adana?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Why are my customers here?" Adana smiled, a sly look crossing her face. "Oh, Wafaa, it seems people have finally realized who the better cook is," she replied smugly. But Wafaa wasn't convinced. There was something off about the whole situation. She noticed the strange herbs hanging from the corners of Adana's shop, herbs she had never seen before. There was also a peculiar scent in the air, something sweet yet unsettling. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Wafaa decided to do some investigating. That night, after Adana had closed up her shop, Wafaa snuck back to take a closer look. She noticed a small, hidden door at the back of the shop, a door that Adana had always kept locked. Curiosity piqued, Wafaa carefully picked the lock and entered. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single candle, and the air was thick with the same strange scent that had lingered in the shop earlier. In the center of the room was a large pot, bubbling over with a dark, viscous liquid. Shelves lined the walls, filled with jars of odd ingredients, dried animal parts, strange roots, and unidentifiable powders. As she moved closer to the pot, Wafaa's eyes widened in horror. Floating in the liquid were small, wriggling creatures, snakes, insects, and other unholy things. A closer look into the same pot revealed what shocked Wafaa the most in her life. She saw what could be simply described as human parts. "What is this, my God?" It was clear now. Adana had turned to dark magic to draw customers to her shop. Wafaa's heart pounded in her chest. She knew she had to stop this before it got out of hand. But she also knew that confronting Adana directly could be dangerous. Instead, she decided to seek help from a powerful herbalist who lived deep in the forest on the outskirts of the village. Early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Wafaa set off for the herbalist's. The journey was long and treacherous, but she was determined. When she finally arrived, the herbalist, an old woman named Mama Ike, listened intently as Wafaa recounted the events. Mama Ike nodded slowly, her face grave. "Dana has indeed meddled with dark forces," she said, "but there is a way to break the spell and save the village from her wickedness." Mama Ike instructed Wafaa to gather specific herbs and ingredients, warning her that the process would not be easy. Wafaa, filled with determination, promised to do whatever it took to bring Adana's evil deeds to light. And so, armed with the knowledge of the herbalist, Wafaa returned to Aoro village, ready to take on the challenge ahead. But as she prepared to face Adana, she couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker was at play, something that went beyond mere rivalry. As Wafaa returned to the village, the air felt heavier, as though the weight of her discovery had altered everything around her. She clutched the pouch of herbs given to her by Mama Ike, each one carefully selected to counter the dark magic Adana had used. But she knew the task ahead would require more than just herbs. It would take cunning, courage, and perhaps a bit of her own magic. Back in Aoro, Adana was basking in her newfound success. Customers flocked to her shop daily, praising her food as if it held some sort of enchantment, and indeed it did. But the more success she gained, the more paranoid she became. She knew Wafaa wouldn't let this go without a fight, and she began to watch her surroundings more carefully, her eyes constantly darting to every shadow, every unfamiliar face. Wafaa decided to act cautiously. She didn't want to alert Adana to her plans just yet. Instead, she began by discreetly visiting the homes of the villagers, sharing her concerns in hushed tones. Some of them, who had long respected Wafaa, agreed to help her in any way they could, though they too feared the dark powers Adana might possess. One night, as the village lay still, Wafaa performed the ritual Mama Ike had taught her. She carefully mixed the herbs and whispered incantations, calling upon the spirits of the land for protection and guidance. As she worked, a strange wind blew through her home, extinguishing her candle. In the darkness, Wafaa felt a presence, ancient and powerful. But rather than fear, she felt reassured, as though the spirits were acknowledging her plea. Meanwhile, Adana's suspicions were growing. She had noticed some of her customers speaking in hushed tones when they thought she wasn't listening. Rumors were spreading through the village, rumors that perhaps her sudden success was not due to her cooking skills alone. Desperate to maintain control, Adana intensified her rituals, using more potent ingredients and performing them more frequently. She was determined to keep her newfound power, no matter the cost. But strange things began to happen in the village. Livestock fell ill, crops withered, and a sense of unease settled over the villagers. Some began to whisper that Adana's magic was not just bringing her customers, but was also cursing the land. Fearing that their livelihoods were at risk, more villagers began to turn against Adana, though few dared to confront her directly. Wafaa knew the time had come to act more boldly. She gathered the village elders and those who had agreed to help her, and together they devised a plan. They would confront Adana publicly, using the herbs and rituals Mama Ike had provided to break her spell in front of everyone. But they had to be careful. Adana's powers were strong, and she would not give up easily. The night of the confrontation arrived. The village square was filled with people, many of whom had been affected by the strange happenings in Aoro. Wafaa and the elders approached Adana's shop, where she stood waiting, a defiant look on her face. "What is the meaning of this?" Adana demanded as she saw the crowd approaching. Wafaa stepped forward, her voice steady. "Adana, your magic has brought harm to this village. It's time for the truth to be revealed." Adana's eyes narrowed. "You're just jealous, Wafaa. You always have been, but you won't take this away from me." With a nod from Wafaa, the elders began to chant the words Mama Ike had taught them. Wafaa scattered the herbs around the shop, and as the chanting grew louder, the wind began to pick up, swirling through the square. Adana's confident expression faltered as she felt the power of the ritual taking hold. But Adana wasn't about to give in without a fight. She raised her hands and began to chant her own incantations, summoning the dark forces she had grown to rely on. The air crackled with energy as the two forces clashed, light against dark, ancient spirits against malevolent magic. For a moment, it seemed as though Adana might overpower them. The wind howled, and the ground shook beneath their feet. But Wafaa, driven by her determination to save the village, continued the ritual, her voice rising above the chaos. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the storm subsided. The air grew still, and a heavy silence fell over the square. Adana collapsed to her knees, her strength drained. The dark magic that had once empowered her was gone, leaving her vulnerable and defeated. The villagers who had watched the confrontation with bated breath slowly began to murmur, realizing that the spell had been broken. Wafaa approached Adana, kneeling beside her. "It's over, Adana," she said softly. "You don't have to live like this anymore." Tears filled Adana's eyes as she looked up at Wafaa. "I just wanted to be more than a shadow," she whispered, her voice trembling with regret. The village elders stepped forward, offering their hands to Adana. "You can still be part of this village, Adana," one of them said, "but not through fear and darkness." Adana hesitated, her gaze lingering on the remnants of her shop. But the lure of power had lost its hold on her. With a weary nod, she accepted their help, allowing them to lead her away from the square. As the crowd dispersed, the villagers began to clean up the remnants of the confrontation. Wafaa stood alone in the square for a moment, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. She had won, but at what cost? The village was safe, but the damage done would take time to heal. But Wafaa knew that this was not the end. There were still questions to be answered, still wounds to mend. And as she turned to leave the square, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger journey.